Brothers and sisters, welcome to CMJ Canada and our study on the Haftarah portion. So a little bit of the Torah portion, and then to get the context, and then some wisdom today from the prophets Ezekiel and the prophets Jeremiah. We're bounded together by time and space through this thing called Zoom, and yet this the same Holy Spirit that is in every single one of our rooms, our houses, and that guy unites us together, and we thank him for it. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we come into your courts with thanksgiving and praise, and we praise you for your greatness, your kingship, your lordship. We thank you for your revelation and your redemption. We thank you for the word and the scriptures. All of these are incredible gifts, and we just humbly want to say thank you for giving them to us to study, to learn, and Lord, to put into practice. And we do pray that you will give the government of Israel wisdom. We pray you'll give protection to the soldiers. We pray you'll bring relief to the Palestinians and mercy. We pray you'll bring victory in your name, in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So the two Torah portions that we're going to be having a look at today are from Exodus, the book of Shmot, and the first one, Vayirah, is from Exodus 6 to 9, and we're dealing with the plagues today. This is the challenge is now here. So over the chapters 6 to 13, we're looking at which is 7 chapters. This is how God gets his people out of Egypt. This is the big thing. The actual majority of the book, of course, isn't about getting your people out of Egypt. It's about building a tent. And so we realize that there's something actually quite important about the tabernacle. So it starts in chapter 6, in verse 3, or our verse 3. Hebrew and English sometimes always don't have the same verses. And God says, I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai. God admits that he appeared to them as El Shaddai, but not as Hashem. You think, okay. So, of course, begs all kinds of questions. One is like, why? And perhaps there's not a very good answer to that, because that would actually put us into the mind of God. But it does demonstrate that one of the themes of Shmot is gaining a name. The book starts with people not having any names. And then as you go through the book, names are added. And a lot of those names are added by what happens around you. Context, history. So for example, Moshe, gets given a name by his foster mother, the Pharaoh's daughter, who's unnamed in the text. Pharaoh himself is going to be unnamed throughout the entire text. He will never get a name. He will never get an identity. Right? Israel will get a name, will get an identity. God will get a name, and he'll get an identity. And as you go through the story, different people will get names and identities. And God here is revealing his identity through his name, because he's about to do something that he has never done before to a group of people who have no knowledge about him. And so he says, in the past, your forefathers knew me like this, El Shaddai, and which we translate as God Almighty, which does not mean that at all. But why not? There's an aspect of his might and his strength in these names, but God Almighty, El Shaddai, literally means God is my breast. And you discover that it's because the patriarchs were clinging to him. Right? They were always in a precarious position. They were wandering nomads. They didn't have statehood. They didn't have very large armies. They could have been destroyed at any time by people who were vastly superior around them. And yet they participated in international politics. Abraham fought 5 kings and engaged in international politics. Isaac He actually had a good little life. He had no trouble, well, apart from the fact that his family's a mess. He himself doesn't like go off to battle. He doesn't have to flee Canaan. No one comes and invades him. He actually has he only has one wife. He has no internal struggle within that, although his kids are a bit of a mess. Jacob ends up unfortunately having to leave the the land and ends up going down into Egypt to join his lost son, and then they reunite for a while, and that's where Israel incubates. Israel really incubates in the land of Egypt. That's where the people grow. That's where they become numerous. That's where their leadership begins to develop. And we'll talk a little bit about Moses and Aaron, but just briefly, because Moses is the hero of the story so far, right? He's going to be the guy that comes and challenges the king of the world at the time, and he's going to bring the people out of Egypt, all kinds of miracles and signs and wonders, and it's absolutely fantastic. Who was looking after Israel, though, for 40 years while Moses was out in Midian? And the answer is Aaron. I mean, the Zakanim, the elders were there because Moses talks to the elders when he comes and speaks to them. But Aaron is also known as a prophet. And when did he get this gift of prophecy? Well, God spoke to him while he was in Egypt and told him, "You need to leave and go to the mountain of God." Was that the first time that Aaron had spoken to the Lord? Probably not. And so Aaron actually partakes in the first couple of miracles. He actually does them. Moses is still learning what to do. He keeps saying, "No, don't even pick me. I can't talk at all." So when you come to the first couple of miracles, it's Aaron who actually does them. Moses is there, and he's going to take credit for it. But again, at the end of the story, Moses is actually forgotten. Aaron gets the priesthood and the genealogy, and everyone remembers Aaron and his kids. Moses, no one remembers his children. So Moses has an interesting career. He has his career is his life, which is very long, and his impact on society is immeasurable because he has this beautiful commentary on the Torah, Deuteronomy, and trying to tell the people of Israel to set up this just society that they hadn't had before. But he doesn't manage to be able to, as well as teaching the people, doesn't manage to teach his kids, and his kids go wayward and disappear. Whereas Aaron loses half his children, but the other half maintain the faith, maintain the tradition, maintain the responsibility and the priesthood, and they keep going. So all the people that we call Cohens and Levites come through Aaron, right? That's Moses' genealogy disappears. So God is being known through his name El Shaddai, to the Lord, Yud Hey Vav Hey. And he says, I'm going to establish this name Hashem. What is it in conjunction with? It's in conjunction with the fact that he's now going to fulfill his covenant. El Shaddai, people are clinging to him and he's giving them promises. Hashem, Yud Hey Vav Hey, he's actually putting that into practice. So when we talk about God as Hashem, it's the covenant keeper, the one who has remembered his covenant and putting him into practice, and he's going to give them the land of Canaan. Of course, this flips, again, the beginnings and the ends. Why do we go to Canaan? Canaan, which we hear comes from Genesis, the ill-fated descendant from Ham, who is cursed. And then to fix the curse, we will put his people there. God has heard the groaning of the people of Israel, yet the people of Israel don't know who God is. They know about something called God, but they have no relationship to him, not like the patriarchs. They didn't cling to the Lord as we would understand the way the patriarchs did. So they don't know God as El Shaddai. They don't know God as God. They're just trying to, who is this thing? He is the creator of the universe. Fine. But they don't have a lot else to go on. They understand that there was perhaps some Adam and Eve. They might know the stories of Noah and the flood. They probably know a fair bit of the wanderings from Abraham on, but it's not a lot to go on. And so these people who don't know God, that God is about to make what is called the four statements of redemption. Okay, the redemption always leads to revelation. It's not usually the other way around. Now, isn't that interesting? You're often redeemed when you don't know God. It's when you don't know God, you cry out for salvation. It's when you don't know God, you're hungry for the words. When you don't know God, that you're desperate to be able to get close to him. And then, unfortunately, when you know God, you tend to run away and fall away. You backslide. You can't backslide when you don't know God. Right? So, what does God do to these people who are crying out to him? He says, I will take you as my people. So the first one, I am going to take you as a people. Redemption includes becoming the people of God. I will be your God. And all other false idols, all other vain things, all other powers and principalities, they will fall by the wayside. God will become supreme. He will be king. Right? Now, for those of us that live in monarchies, we appreciate that. Those that don't live in monarchies have problems with that. The point is, God will remove anything else that usurps him. I will take you as my people. I will be your God. These are non-negotiables. Then you will know that I am the Lord, right? I will make you my people. I will become your God. That's the redemption. Then you will know that I'm God. That's the revelation. Redemption leads to revelation. The Exodus gets you to Mount Sinai, where God shows up. God doesn't show up in Egypt. You got to go through the next 7 chapters first. I will bring you to the land that I swore on your fathers. So the redemption and the revelation also includes a land. It always has, it always does, and it's the thing we always fight over, right? The enemy, Hamas could go attack Jews in America. They really could. A lot of them, but let's do it in Israel because it's got to do with the land, right? There's something about that as well. I will bring you into the land, and I will give it to you as an inheritance. So those are the 4 things, right? I will take you as a people. I will become your God, and then you'll know who I am. I will give you a land, and it will become an inheritance. There will be a future as part of this process. Okay, and that's what we're these are his expressions of or what they call the expressions of redemption. So Moses spoke thus to the children of Israel. This is verse 9. Here's something really sad. But they didn't heed Moses. Why? Why not? He just said some very beautiful words, right? Words of hope, words of like, you've been crying out for help. Help has arrived. And here's what he's got to say. He's promising 4 things. And currently, out of these 4 things, none of them have any condition, right? There's no, I will make you my people. If you are good, if you obey the Sabbath, if you stop eating pork, you crazy people, if you give up the cucumbers, right? No condition whatsoever. And then it says this, Moses spoke to the children of Israel, but they didn't heed Moses because of anguish of spirit and cruel bondage. Their suffering stopped them from hearing the good news, or at least believing it. Isn't that sad? Now, if we're all admit it, we probably all know people in exactly the same scenario. They're struggling. They're crying out for help. You come with the good news and they reject it. You think, what? Wait a second. I'm giving you exactly what you wanted. And we can see it right here in scripture. Circumstances sometimes stop us from hearing God or seeing what he's doing. And so one of our challenges, brothers and sisters, is to figure out how to help people see God working in their lives. It is not an easy task. I don't pretend to know that I have the answer, other than we can't give up. Moses doesn't. Moses doesn't go, well, really? Seriously? Okay, I'm out of here. You're a bunch of losers. Stay slaves forever. See if I care. Right? That's not what's going to happen. Right? So we have to have that same attitude, that sort of giving you the hope, you've rejected it. We're going to try again. Because I know that in your despair, it's really hard to see hope. In your suffering, it's really hard to see redemption. I get it. And I'm not going to give up. And that's something that we need to have. Okay, and that includes in our current situation here in Israel right now. You know, you look at the future and you think, how can we win? How do we stop all this? And you can quickly lead to despair, but you're not allowed to give up. That's the thing. Don't give up. Alrighty, so Moses is not going to give up. God says to Moses, you go tell that Pharaoh. Now remember, he never gets a name. Pharaoh will never get a name. He will never have an identity. Okay? Everything about him, everything about Egypt is the antithesis of what Moses is. In Egypt, they built pyramids, massive monuments to themselves, which was the giant cult of death. It was to put a dead body inside, right? They mummified themselves. They frescoed the walls with the afterlife. They built a religion around death to remember themselves. And yet, who remembers anything from the Egyptians? Everyone remembers Moses. Yet he doesn't have a big pyramid. No one even knows where he's buried. Okay, he didn't go out to aggrandize himself, and he worships the God of life. Completely the opposite. Right? You have this massive clash going on. Death and life are about to meet. And of course, that doesn't mean Moses doesn't complain. God complains all the time, in case you haven't noticed. He says the children of Israel didn't pay any attention. You know, he gives his little boohoo speech and then says, don't bother sending me. I'm a man of uncircumcised lips. Okay, he's got some sort of speech impediment. We don't know what that was. Was it a stuttering problem? Was he actually shy? Right, every time he went to speak, he got red in the face. I mean, who knows? Okay, was he actually eloquent, or could he actually convince people? Obviously, not so well in his first encounter. But because of this verse, that the big prophet of God has some sort of speech impediment. When you get to Deuteronomy, that where Moses says in chapter 18, someone like me, God will raise up a prophet like me. The conclusion is all great prophets of God have speech impediments. There you go. There's a great sign to see if someone says I'm a prophet from God. You go, okay, start talking, chap. And they start calling, everything comes out beautiful. So, no, I'm not 100% sure of that. Yeah, do you mind stuttering a little for me? That might convince me something. Okay, so you end up with, like, because we're studying Isaiah, the tradition is he had a giant speech impediment. And why? Because he's like Moses. And so he has to be. So anyway, just a thing that it's just one way that Jewish people read the text. They go, like Moses, let's be just like Moses with speech impediments. Okay. And then you get this genealogy, just suddenly breaks into a genealogy. Here we are about to have the clash of kings, and we get into a family lineage. But that's actually a very Jewish thing to do, okay? Because it's a Jewish people love to know what your last name was, where your family comes from, any sort of heritage that you've got. Okay, I mean that's probably why the indigenous have such fun here, because there's great long genealogies. Okay, you start talking about my family, says, oh, we're a bunch of thieves. Yeah, you don't really want to know about them. Came on a boat, stole the boat actually on the way over. It was a lot of fun. Ended up having to swim. Who knows? But here they break into a genealogy, and it's about Aaron. Okay, and why? Because he's the guy that actually ends up continuing the line. Okay, poor old Moses, it was great. I'm not going to say he's not, right? We call it the Torah of Moses. No one ever called it the Torah of Aaron. Okay, but it's still the Aaronic blessing. It's still the Aaronic and Levitical priesthood. But you get this long little description, and that's actually quite a Hebraic way of doing things. So it's not really out of place. Although you will find some commentaries that'll go, "What is this doing here?" We were telling a story, and then we had family time. But then we get back into the story in verse 7, where God says something very interesting. So Moses has said, look, I can't talk. I obviously can't convince people that you're real. I told the elders, but no one seems to believe me. So the Lord says to Moses, so God says to Moses, I have made you like a god, right, to Pharaoh. And Aaron, your brother, will be your prophet. So you're a god, and Aaron's the prophet. And you go, whoa, hang on a second. What's going on here? Why use that kind of language? I mean, it's the Torah actually has Moses like God many times. Okay, one of my favorites is going to be in Deuteronomy, right at the end of Deuteronomy, when it talks about Moses just as he's dying. It says, Moshe ish Elohim, Moses, the man God. In English, we say the man of God, but the actual Hebrew is Moses, man God. And a lot of the commentaries, Jewish midrashim, will go, when was Moses God, and when was Moses a man? And you go, what? Hang on a second. And but so here, God says, I make gods. I decide who's divine around here. Because who's he challenging? He's challenging Pharaoh. And what does Pharaoh think he is? Pharaoh thinks he's a god. So you got this clash of people running around. Lots of claims to divinity going on here. But in the end, it's God says, no, no, no. I decide who's actually divine around here, and it ain't you. Okay. But in his eyes, you're going to look pretty special, because you're going to do all these incredible signs and wonders. And it's true, those guys did signs and wonders. So you got to remember, they kind of looked like magicians. And we would actually do the same thing. Imagine if a faith healer came to town. Everybody loves faith healers. Why? Because they heal people, right? And everybody gets sick, and everybody doesn't like being sick. So when they start healing people miraculously, then they are elevated in their sight. They shouldn't be, should they? Who gave them the gift of that? Does it come from them? No, it came from God. But it's very rare that you elevate God. Often you really do elevate the person. And Moses is about to be elevated in the eyes of the Egyptians. Did he want it? Probably not. But God said, it's going to be you, man. They're going to think of you as a divine being. And a proof of that is going to be where Aaron's staff is now going to become the serpent. Remember, it was Moses before. Now it switches to Aaron. And the word changes. In the burning bush, Moses puts his staff down. It's a nachash. It's very reminiscent of the Garden of Eden and the snake, because it's the same word. But when Aaron puts his staff down, it's not a nachash. It's a tanin, which is a crocodile. Okay, different animal entirely. Okay, now we translate it as serpent. That's what we do. But actually, when you actually end up in the battle with the magicians, It's he puts his staff down and it's a crocodile. It's a different word entirely. Okay, just so you know. Okay. Although we're all going to translate it snake. Everybody translates it snake across the board. I have yet to see one English translation translate it correctly. It's just what we do. Okay. We just call it the serpent. Why is there a different word? Don't know. Okay. But the first plagues begin and the clash begins, and you end up with the magicians being able to do the first couple of plagues. How could they possibly do such a thing? I hear you ask. That's because magic is real. The Bible does not say magic is false. It says it's forbidden. Those things are two different things. Right? One, you could easily dismiss it. No, it's all false. It's just a scientific trick. Miracles don't happen. But in the Bible, they understand that magic is a real element. There is a power beyond the world that we see. And some people have access to it. How did they learn such a thing? I hear you ask. That's a very good question. Our Bible, doesn't say. Our Bible does not say how these magicians learnt to do such a thing. How did they do it? Well, that's where you go into other books of the Bible. That's where you go into other texts. And the book of Jubilees and the book of Enoch, which are both preserved by our dear brothers down in Ethiopia, they have in their canon these two tomes. Enoch is quite a larger one. Jubilees not so much, but it's still a very good text. And it expands it expands Genesis and Exodus. It basically it follows exactly the same theme and line. Like it doesn't go out of history. It stays in the same ABC, but it adds things. It adds little gaps in the middle. It describes the things that perhaps our text misses. So when it says the sons of God mingled with the daughters of Adam in Genesis, it actually tells you these are angels. It gives you all their names. It tells you what they did. And one of the things it does, it lists which angels came down and taught humans things that they shouldn't. So it'll say such and such an angel taught men how to make war. Such and such an angel taught men how to do X, Y, Z. It'll say one angel even taught women how to put makeup on. Don't know why that little line got thrown in there, but there you go. And but one angel teaches magic, which means he brings wisdom, which was in heaven, which did exist and still does exist, and he brought it to earth where it should not have been. And so God doesn't say this doesn't work. What he says is this is forbidden. You're not supposed to have it. And James, in chapter 3 of James, he says the wisdom of earth is demonic and the wisdom of heaven is pure. And, he knows that there's this tradition that something came down, it shouldn't have been here. But so we see these magicians do the first couple of plagues, except in chapter 8, in plague number 3, where they are unable to reproduce lice. So then they turn around with a very famous phrase. They say, "This is the finger of God," which is an amazing admission because Pharaoh has struggled to know who God is. He says, "Who is this God? I don't know this God you're talking about, Moses." And his magicians turn around and they say, "This, what we're looking at, that's the finger of God. You'd better go learn." And it's that phrase that ends up in the Haggadah. It's in the Passover liturgy, and it's in Luke when Jesus is challenged. You're casting out demons by Beelzebub, and he says, "No, no, I cast out demons by the finger of God," which is a harken back to this phrase, this power that's come and is smacking the Egyptian gods around. So it's a very powerful phrase. The other thing that's very important to note before we leave off the Torah portion and go into Haftarah is Pharaoh hardens his heart. Okay, for the first 6 times, Pharaoh hardens his own heart. And he sees the devastation that's happening. He sees the miracles before him. He's got his okay for the first 2 miracles. Like you can kind of get it because his own magicians can mimic it, mimic the power. But after that, he continues to harden his own heart, and then God does. God then begins to harden his heart too. Why? Because God honors his choice. You know, there's always this big discussion. Why does God harden the heart of Pharaoh? Why doesn't he let Pharaoh repent? Because what he's done is he's allowed Pharaoh to make his own free choices. He's allowed Pharaoh to go down a path. And once Pharaoh has gone down so far down that path, God has said, okay, I will now help you. I will now help you continue in your horrible choice. Now, isn't that sad? And isn't that a warning? That should be a warning to absolutely everyone that at some point God says, okay, and you'll see it in the New Testament, God has given them over to themselves. He's given them over to their lusts and their wickedness. He said, you've made this choice. Okay, I will help you. I will help you in your disbelief because you don't really want to believe me. You don't really want to care. You don't really want to help your neighbor. You don't really want to do anything I want. So let's all have a party. But when the judgment comes, you won't like it. And that's what you end up getting. You will end up racing towards the angel of death, and you won't like that. So the Haftarah portion to this, and God appears, is from Ezekiel, everybody's favorite mystical book that no one understands. All right. Ezekiel. And Ezekiel 28 starts at 25 to 29. And what's the connection? Why did they link this prophet to this Torah portion? I hear you ask. Let's find out. So it starts in Ezekiel 28:25. Thus says the Lord God, when I gathered the house of Israel from the peoples among whom they scattered. So we're looking at exile and restoration. Now remember, redemption always leads to revelation. And what's going on in the Exodus is a people are coming out and becoming a nation and a people, which is what you get again here. When I've gathered the house of Israel from the peoples among whom they are scattered, so we've got an exile, a return from exile happening, and I am made holy in the sight of the Gentiles. So the promise of being taken out of the Gentiles is very similar to the promise of being taken out from the suffering from Egypt. Okay, and the promise is God is going to be made great. So he's being made great in the Exodus, and he's going to be made great by bringing people back and creating the land of Israel. They will dwell in their own land because it's about land, right? I will make a people for myself. I will become their God. I will give them a land. So there's definitely a connection, which I gave my servant. They will dwell safely there, build houses, plant vineyards. Yes, they'll be secure when I execute judgment on everyone who despised them, right? And then they'll know that I am God. So redemption leads to revelation. So God brings them back, and then they will know that they're God. They don't know that he's God before. You know, when you read the stories of all the early returns back to Zion in the 1800s and the early 1900s, they're all socialists, right? Why do we start a whole bunch of kibbutzim? Because we don't believe in God at all, right? The sort of most of the people who came back to Zion were all socialists. When they started the state of Israel, the number of Haredim in this country was only several thousand, right? That's why Ben Gurion, he thought it was fine. You know, well, the state will pay for you. Go sit in your yeshivas. Just go pray. You'll be fine. Just give me backing when it comes to vote for the state. You'll be great. But then they had 10 to 12 kids per family, and before you know it, they're 20% of the population. But that was not the way it started. right? When they started the state of Israel, it was largely secular. And if you happen to come to Israel, we can take you to the first two kibbutzim here, Degania Aleph and Degania Bet, which was actually one kibbutz, and it was socialist. And it was so socialist and so united that it split up into two because they couldn't agree. And it's the one that looks after Yardenit, the baptismal site for Christians, which I always find so ironic that this completely secular kibbutz runs a fantastic baptismal site where millions of people go and get baptized, rededicate themselves to God, swear better allegiance, baptize new believers. We've baptized lots of new believers. Last year we baptized Omer there. Just a little piece of irony that I always find fun. Okay, so redemption leads to revelation, which is the story of the Exodus, and this idea of bringing his people back and putting them in their land. And all right, so then God says about Egypt. Now remember, Egypt is where Israel is, and it's about to get smacked in the Exodus. And so the prophet Ezekiel says, in the 10th year, in the 10th month, on the 12th day, right? So very Pacific in its time frame. If you go back into history when he's actually talking prior to the exile, like just before. So he's making proclamations about return, but just before the destruction. God says, "Son of man." Okay? Ezekiel is one of the only characters called Son of Man, literally Ben Adam in Hebrew, which is means human. In Daniel, the word Son of Man there is in Aramaic. Okay, Bar Enosh. So Jesus could easily have been very clever talking to people in Hebrew, and then when he calls himself Son of Man, switches to Aramaic. And that would be a signal, oh, you're talking about the character in Daniel, not just as a human. Right? Because if you wanted to say, I'm just a human, you would say this is how you say it in Hebrew. Ani pashut ben adam. I'm just simply a guy. Okay, I make all kinds of mistakes, I burp and fart, blah 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 blah. Yeah, I'm just a guy. But if I said ani ben bar enosh, well, that's very different. Now you're talking about somebody in Daniel, and only there is he an eschatological character. But this is a human, and God says, set your face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Again, never gets a name. That guy never gets a name. He has no identity. The enemy has no identity. Okay, and prophesy against him and against Israel, and say, "I'm against you, Pharaoh." Okay, this is very, very similar to what Moses and God and Aaron had to do in Exodus. "I am against you. You are a monster that lives in the midst of the rivers." And guess what word there is for monster? It's tanin. Yeah, it's crocodile. Okay, it's the same word that the magicians are all going to fight over. Okay, because he said, "The river is my own. I have made it for myself." This sort of idea that the pharaohs are constantly claiming themselves some sort of divinity or some sort of godhood or some sort of control over nature, of which they have none. And God doesn't like usurpers, and so he's going to put hooks in your jaw, and I'm going to bring you out of the midst of your rivers, and all the fish in your rivers will stick to your scales, and I'll leave you in the wilderness. God's going to take him out of a place of safety and dump him in somewhere where there's no water. Now, one of the great strengths of Egypt was, of course, the Nile. Okay, the Nile was a beautiful river and a delta. It constantly flooded, which means they had lots of access to food. They could grow lots of food. If you grow lots of food, you can sustain a big population. If you can sustain a big population, you can sustain a big army. And if you have a big army, you can take over all your neighbors. So that's why Egypt is an empire and Mesopotamia is an empire. And very few other people can create empires unless you have access to water and food. And then you can have lots of people. And that's actually going to be a problem for the future, ladies and gentlemen. As the world's population decreases, Guess what's not going to be able to be sustained? You ready for this? Armies. People aren't having kids, so therefore there's not enough young people, so therefore there's not enough soldiers. And so, for example, if you're South Korea, you'd probably be very nervous right about now, because currently you've got about 40 million people in your country, and you're guarding your border with an army against the north. But in 50 years' time, when your population shrinks to 22 million, you won't have any soldiers. So who's going to guard your border? It's a big problem, isn't it? So the issue in the past is the same issue today. You need to have lots of food. You need to have a nice water source, and you need to be able to sustain your population. Well, where's God going to dump him? He's going to dump him in the wilderness where there's no water. You ain't got nothing. You haven't got your army. You haven't got your people. You haven't got your food. I'm taking you out of everything that you thought was secure and strong and such. And and for all, then verse 6, here's something very key to this prophecy. So God is going to take judgment on Egypt. Okay, that's fantastic. Let's smack the Egyptians around. We did it in the past. Let's do it in the future. Then all the inhabitants of Egypt shall know that I am the Lord. God would like to reveal himself to the Egyptians. They have a part to play in the future. They had a part to play in the past. That's where Joseph came down and he became the second in charge, and God used Egypt to save the world back then. All these people would have starved if it hadn't have been for Joseph and the Egyptians. And the people of Israel were incubated. Did they suffer there? Yes. Should they have suffered? No. Okay, it doesn't always work out the way we would like it. But God's got a little soft spot for Egypt, and he's going to reveal himself to them. And that's why in Isaiah 19, Egypt still has a valuable part to play. He says there's going to be a highway from Egypt, not Chad, not Nigeria, okay, Egypt to Assyria. There's something about this place. And so the prophet here is just giving that little hint as well. The inhabitants will know that I'm God, right? Okay, because they have been a staff of need to the house of Israel. When they took hold of you from the hands, you broke all their shoulders. They leaned on you. You were supposed to help, but you didn't. So the inhabitants of Egypt are going to know that who is God. There's going to be exile for them, but God's also going to return them. Okay? Verse 13. Yet says the Lord God, at the end of 40 years, that's an interesting number, I will gather the Egyptians from the peoples among whom they were scattered. I will bring back the captives of Egypt. Why? We're talking about a bunch of Gentiles here, but they're really important to God. I'm going to bring them back. Okay? Just like Israel was exiled and returned. Egypt is exiled and returned. And I will bring back the captives of Egypt and cause them to return to the land of Patros, to the land of their origin, and there they shall be a lowly kingdom. There'll still be a kingdom, but it won't be as great and as powerful as there was before. It will be the lowliest of kingdoms. It'll never again exalt itself among the nations, for I will diminish them so that they will not rule over other nations anymore. No longer shall it be the competence of the house of Israel, okay? Because remember, Egypt was quite powerful during Israel's initial stages in the land of Canaan. Solomon makes a peace treaty with Egypt. He takes a wife from the king of Pharaoh, the daughter of Pharaoh, one of his first wives, and he takes some of their horses, none of which he was allowed to do, but he did it anyway. And so they actually played a big part, and they also played a part in the fall of Jerusalem, because they couldn't actually assist. Babylon and Egypt were fighting, and Nebuchadnezzar actually went all the way down into Egypt and smacked them around a bit on the way back, and the people of Judah really thought look, we'll fight Babylon. Egypt will come to our help. But then they never did because they couldn't, because they were actually too weak by this stage. And but verse 16 says, no longer shall it be the confidence of the house of Israel, but it will remind them of their iniquity when they turn to follow them, and they shall know that I am the Lord. Again, this idea that that uh, that 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 Egypt is somehow eventually going to hear that God is coming. In verse 21, we talk about in that day, B'yom Hahu. B'yom Hahu is a messianic phrase. It first appears in Samuel, the book of Samuel, okay, where the phrase in that day begins to take part of it in the prophetic voice. And it's always linked to the future. It's always linked to the days of the Messiah. So whenever you see the phrase in that day, we're talking about messianic redemption in future, where redemption leads to revelation. Always remember that theme, okay? That something happens, God does something powerful, and it's usually a bunch of people who don't know anything about him, but because of their redemption, they begin to realize that there's actually a God in heaven. I will cause a horn of the house of Israel to spring forth. I will open up your mouth and speak in their midst, and then they will know that I am the Lord. So not only the Egyptians are going to come back in ignorance, Israel will come back in ignorance, and everybody will hear that God is true. So that's Vayira. That's the first couple of plagues and its corresponding Haftarah passage, where we talk about, we're looking now at the beginnings of the redemptive act and God revealing himself to Israel in Egypt and later to Egypt, and also then by default Israel. So in the next text is Exodus 10, where it's called Bo in Hebrew, and it starts, I'll read the English, Exodus 10 verse 1. Now the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh. That kid never going to get a name, ever. For I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his servants. So God is fulfilling the desires of Pharaoh and has hardened his heart. Except that my English word says, go to Pharaoh. I bet everybody's English Bible says that, go to Pharaoh. But that's not what bo means. Bo in Hebrew means come. So imagine, think it now, where's God? God says to Moses, come to Pharaoh. Not go to Pharaoh, come to Pharaoh, which of course then begs the question, where's God? God is with Pharaoh. God's with his people in Egypt. God, even though they don't know him, God is there quietly suffering with them. He has gone down to Egypt as he promised Jacob that he would do. And he's going to come out of Egypt. So who comes out of Egypt during the Exodus? Yes, the Israelites, but also God. And so God is saying, come, Moses, come to Pharaoh. I'm right here. We'll take this guy on together. Okay, he's all primed up, ready for you. Okay, I've hardened his heart. He's an absolute mess. Let's go. And you're in this Torah portion is the last three plagues, and God is going to show his signs and wonders, that I may show these signs, that you may tell in the hearing of your son and of your son's son the mighty things that I have done in Egypt, and the signs that I have done amongst them, that you may know that I am the Lord God. So what you're getting here is a command to tell history, tell stories. Okay, we in the Western nations, we don't like history as much as we probably should, but that is actually one of the things that God also delights in, is tell the story again. There's a reason why I'm doing this. Okay, and I'm going to do it such a powerful way that this memory is going to go on. So you will tell your kids and they'll tell their kids, and the memory of everything that I've done here is not going to fade into oblivion. It's not going to disappear. It's not just going to become ink on a page. You're going to tell the story. And that's what we do every year at Passover. Right? You retell the story, which you already know. In fact, that's actually the job of a preacher, right? A preacher's job isn't to make up anything new. It's to tell you the story you already know. You gather together and you say, hey guys, let's tell the same story. We already know the story. Let's tell it again. And that's as fresh and as exciting as a way as possible, so that we put all the learning back into action. Like, it's not just a story for fun's sake, it's a story for a purpose. Memory leads you into action. So you tell the story. And here we have the last couple of plagues. And it involves the first one, the first of the last plagues, is plague 8, locusts, involves bargaining. Pharaoh's up to the bargaining stage, right? Well, maybe the men go, but leave the women and children here, right? And this sort of bargaining idea with God, which you can't do. And the plague of darkness, where the Egyptians are dark and the light is on the Israelites, which of course leads to a beautiful midrash, which is how did the Egyptians go to the toilet for 3 days? How did they cook their food? Like there's no light whatsoever. But the Israelites had light. And so what happened is the Egyptians basically said, Israelite, come here, come into my house. I need to cook dinner. Right? And so wherever an Israelite went, the light went with him. And he could then share the light. Oh, that's an interesting little phrase. Share your light. Light shines in the darkness wherever you go. And so there was this strong push for evangelism, right? The children of Israel began to evangelize. How so? Well, maybe not your God's suck and my God's true, but more like, I'm sharing the light that I've got, which is actually what we're all supposed to do. Remember, a mixed multitude are going to come out with the Israelites. Now, why? Because they're beginning to see. They're beginning to see the light. And you have to be in a very dark place to actually see the light, by the way. It's not easy to see light when you're in light. And so the Israelites were sharing their light. And then, of course, you get to the final plague, which, of course, is the death of the firstborn, which is full of so many questions. So first of all, the last plague in verse 12, chapter 12, actually starts with a calendar. Right? You start the plague by making a calendar. This month will be the beginning of months. You start a liturgy. You start a sacred calendar. You start something that most churches don't like anymore. Okay? You don't leap into the plague. You leap into how you're going to remember it. And this plague, this is the only plague that involves your participation. The first 9, God did everything. Well, he used Aaron and Moses, but the children of Israel didn't have to do anything to have light. They didn't have to do anything to avoid the frogs. They didn't have to do anything to get fresh water instead of blood. But to preserve themselves from the angel of death, you have to put blood on your doorpost. If you don't, you will suffer the same fate as everybody else. And here's the interesting thing is, this plague applied to them. Only they get the solution. No, Moses doesn't tell the Egyptians, hey, you'd better put some blood on your doorpost. Last plague's coming. It only applies to Israel. Israel, the last plague is coming. So take a lamb, put it into your house, 3 days, prepare. Then you notice about this lamb. Okay, the lamb is 1 lamb per family. It's not 1 lamb per individual. It's 1 lamb per household. Whoever's in that household, doesn't matter. Not the size doesn't matter. You could have 3 kids, you could have 12 kids, you could have your mother-in-law over and all of her offspring as well. Okay, 1 lamb per household. It's not dependent upon size. It's not for sin. The Passover lamb is not for sin. We often will say Jesus is the Passover lamb, and it's, and yeah, he is. But Passover lamb's not for sin. That's something else. Okay, this is to stop death. Right? One of the aspects of Jesus' sacrifice is he defeats death. Not just gets rid of sin. He defeats death. Nothing else could do that. Right? Not even the Yom Kippur sacrifice defeats death. Right? Passover defeats death. And how does it defeat death? Through obedience. If you don't put the blood on the doorpost, it doesn't matter. You have to put the blood on the doorpost. So there's a participation. You participate in the redemptive activity. You're part of it. You get told it, and you can share it. Now that you know that I've got myself some blood on the doorpost and the angel of death is coming, but anyone inside my building is safe, what do? Well, you go check on your neighbors. Did they put blood on the doorpost? If they didn't, say, guys, come to my house for dinner. You really bring that lamb, by the way. Come. You've got to be really quick. Okay. What about some Egyptians? You might meet some Egyptians. You need to come into my house. And anybody who was in that house was saved. Now, when the angel comes down, he begins to go through, and it's very interesting. It says even the people that were in prison, right? Their firstborn died. You're like, what? They didn't even get a chance to get the blood on the doorpost. Well, of course not. None of the Egyptians did. They had to be told by an Israelite. So some people might read this text and go, well, that doesn't seem very fair. This is corporate punishment. Yes, it's corporate punishment, which, by the way, is what happens all over the world. Anytime our governments do something stupid, everybody suffers. It's called corporate punishment. Okay. We're not our own little kings. We're all under somebody. So we're under our parents, we're under our local governments, we're under our provincial councils or provincial governments, and the federal government. Okay, and that's the thing. And so Pharaoh had made a poor choice. Everyone's going to suffer from Pharaoh down. Now, notice Pharaoh doesn't die. All the firstborn die. So what does that tell you about Pharaoh? You're not the firstborn. Okay. So it's an interesting little take on it there. All right. Interestingly, in chapter 12, verse 43, it says, no foreigner is allowed to eat of this Passover, which is changed in Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy, Moses says, no, the strangers need to partake in this too. Okay, that's one of the interesting things about Deuteronomy is Moses has a look at what's in the Torah, and as he's making comments, sometimes he changes a few things. So in Exodus, it says, no, Gentiles have nothing to do with this. They don't get any of it. And in Deuteronomy, Moses is saying, yeah, they do, because you're actually going to be a light to the nations. They're actually going to want to come in and do this. And in Exodus 13, verse 8, let me just get that for you. In verse 8, it says, and you shall tell your son, remember memory, okay, this idea of retelling everything. Tell your son in that day, saying, when you're sitting down to doing Passover, why do I do this? This is done because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. Right? And that is the line that's in the Haggadah. And it's here in Exodus. It's setting up something that is timeless. When you're part of history, tell your son, I'm doing this, I'm having Passover, I'm remembering the story, I'm rereading the book of Exodus, I'm drinking my 4 cups of wine, whatever. I'm doing it. Why? Because this is what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. Now, were any of these Israelites, Jewish people in Israel, in Egypt, except as tourists? Most of them not. I bet 98% of all Israelites in this country have never been to Egypt. So you can't literally say that, but you do, because you're You're part of the story. What happens with sacred time is it collapses. Where you are catapulted into the story. It is as though you are part of the Exodus. And that, by the way, is exactly the same way people are supposed to look at communion. You're not re-killing God, right? What's happening is you're catapulted back to that time when Jesus says, this is my body and this is my blood. You are catapulted. You become part of the narrative. And too many of us, many preachers and priests have forgotten of what they're doing. It's sacred time. And it's a very Jewish thing to do, to become part of the story. And so that's set up here in this Torah portion. Well, this Torah portion has Jeremiah as its prophet of choice, and Jeremiah 46 at verse 13, where we start. And it's about the striking of Egypt, but this time with Babylon. So kind of a little bit of a link, I guess. The word of the Lord spoke to Jeremiah the prophet, how Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, would come and strike the land of Egypt. Declare to Egypt, proclaim in Migdal, Nof, and Taf, how do you say that? Tapanhes, the probably border town of Egypt and Canaan. And declare to them, stand fast, prepare yourselves, for the sword devours all around you. Why are your valiant men swept away? So God is going to visit punishment on Egypt again, but this time through Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. Now, this is an interesting prophecy because we're talking about two Gentile nations. So it's a Jewish prophet concerning himself with the political machinations of two Gentile nations, pagans. What do we care about that? Okay? But the Bible does. Okay, God does, cares about these guys. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar is actually going to write one whole chapter of the Bible. Daniel chapter 4, written by him. Yeah. Some pagan king gets to write this stuff? Sometimes. Okay? There's actually other little letters sometimes where you find these other foreign rulers and people get to add their little voice to the sacred text. But God says to these people, he says to Egypt, prepare yourselves, right? Prepare yourselves for battle. By the way, you're going to lose. Okay, but prepare yourselves. Your soldiers will fall anyway, so why bother fighting? Right? It's an interesting thing. The Lord is going to fight for Babylon. Why? It's a pagan culture. But God is also concerned with these nations as well. Okay. Why, verse 15, why are your valiant men swept away? They didn't stand because the Lord drove them away, not the Babylonians. The prophet is going to say God's fighting for the Babylonians. Okay. What do they deserve to have God fight for them? God actually also plays international politics too. They fell upon each other. They said, alas, let's go back to our own people, to the land of our nativity, from the oppressing sword. Egypt basically shrinks, okay, in the face of Babylon. And Egypt cannot come to the defense of Judah, so Judah is going to fall too, right? Nebuchadnezzar is going to also now besiege Jerusalem. He's going to destroy the people of God, etc., etc. And that's all. This is he hasn't destroyed the temple yet, but he's taking care of his big adversary, Egypt, first. They cried in verse 17, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, he's but a noise. He has passed by his appointed time. He himself, he ruled for a time. Like God sets up kings and casts them down. And that includes our dear brothers in Hamas and in the Israeli government. All of us, really, okay, are in the hands of the Lord. So who is supposed to be king? We're talking about lots of different kings here. Got the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, got King Nebuchadnezzar. They're all kings. They all thought they were gods. But God says, as I live, says the king, whose name is Adonai Tsevaot, I'm the commander of armies. You've got bigger armies, I've got a bigger army. You think you're winning, I'm actually doing all the fighting. You think you're a king, I'm a real king. And so God is uh, in this Clash of Kings, he's actually becoming exalted. But he will come. The daughter dwelling in Egypt, prepare yourself to go into captivity. Okay, Egypt goes into exile, and as we see in Ezekiel, he's going to bring them back. Right? But here we're talking about how they get there in there, because we got to remember that the Bible is not chronological. Okay, so even though Jeremiah comes first, Ezekiel's actually prophesying a return. Egypt's described as a pretty heifer, beautiful. Okay, and Egypt was beautiful. It was always the jewel. Everybody wanted to own it. Okay, it was fertile. It was lush. It was a gateway to the riches of Africa. Which, by the way, Africa is rich. Anyone who's ever been to Africa, anyone who has any history of Africa knows that it has absolutely every known mineral known to man. Okay, and yet it's a basket case of a country because they can't seem to figure out how to use those resources adequately. Okay, it's got everything, and Egypt was its gateway. But destruction comes, and where does it come from? The north. Right? Egypt is a very pretty, but destruction comes from the north, which is Babylon. Okay, but in Jewish tradition, the north is also the place of redemption. Right? That's where the beginning of redemption comes. The bad guys come from the north too, in like Gog Magog fighting, but the north is where you see the great light first in the lands of Zebulun and Naphtali. Leviticus 1:11 is where you make your sacrifices to the north, and in Psalm 75, its redemption comes from the north. So these kings are fighting, and the God is the real king. And in verse 25, it says, the Lord of hosts, armies, the God of Israel says, I'll bring punishment on Ammon, No, Pharaoh, and Egypt with their gods and their kings, Pharaoh and those who trust in him, and I will deliver them into the hand of those who seek their lives, into the land of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, into the land of his servants. And afterwards, it'll be inhabited as of the days of old. So there's this promise that God will return Egypt. Why? Just like we've seen in Ezekiel, just like we've seen in Isaiah, which we see here in Jeremiah, and we need to own it. God has a plan for Egypt. Yes, we fight them in the 6-Day War and all that kind of stuff, but he has a plan for them. He's got a real plan for figuring out how Egypt works with Israel to make the world a better place. So God is going to work through Egypt, but God says, "Do not fear, servant Jacob. Don't be dismayed, Israel. Behold, I'll save you from afar, from your captivity, from the land of your, but I'll save your offspring from the land of their captivity. Jacob will return." So Egypt's going to come back, but Israel is also going to come back, and you'll have rest. No one will make you afraid. Don't fear, Jacob, my servant. I'm with you. I'll make a complete end of all the nations to which I have driven you, but I will not make a complete end of you. I will rightly correct you, and I will not leave, for I will not leave you wholly unpunished. God, as much as God is also prophesying return, he's also prophesying discipline. And one of the things that we need to remember is discipline hurts. Okay, it hurts. And Israel has been disciplined and might even be going through some. Okay, it hurts. It's not pleasant. Okay, but that's not the end either. The end is even the discipline of Egypt, which was horribly painful too. It's also going to be returned. And in case anybody hasn't noticed, Egypt is a very flourishing country in the effect that it's incredibly poor still, but it's full of people. Right? There's 70-something million people sitting there in Egypt, and it's just a burgeoning population. A lot of people being born there, a lot of people growing there, and the gospel is vibrant there. God has not left his name unknown. It might not be our brand of Christianity, and it's not, but it's very vibrant. I'm sure most of you have already looked up the garbage dump church of Cairo. Okay, largest church in the Middle East is a charismatic Coptic church inside a garbage dump, and very charismatic, very Pentecostal, full of praise and worship, signs and wonders, and because God is working amongst that area. Okay. Oh, there you go. Janice has even been to it. Fantastic. Then you probably have some pretty good stories to tell us, which I would like to hear in just a minute. But there you go. So what you see in the Exodus is this clash of gods. Everybody's trying to think that they're a god. God says, no, I make gods. I'm God. And as he's going through the plagues, the people of Israel begin to participate. They participate by sharing their light and sharing their homes. And when they leave Egypt, a bunch of Egyptians come with them, a large number. And so the Exodus is Jews and Gentiles. It's not just Jews. People standing at Mount Sinai are Jews and Gentiles. And because redemption has always been for Jews and Gentiles, it sets up that pattern that there's always meant to be Gentiles part of it. And as you go through the prophets, you suddenly realize God is actually working through Gentile nations. He exiles them too. He brings them back. He's got plans for them. Somehow Israel is all a part of that story, shining its light and sharing their faith. But revelation comes after the redemptive activity. Often you have to get saved first before you actually realize who it is this God is actually saving you. You get that deeper knowledge and deeper revelation, which of course you're meant to share. You're meant to share that. Jesus says, right, go into the world and make disciples. Teach them who's saving. Teach them who's redeeming. Teach them who's actually got big plans and for the entire world. Because the Torah itself, the first 5 books of the Bible, let's remember that it is a story that has a beginning, but it doesn't have an end. Right? The first 5 books of the Bible get the children of Israel out of Egypt, but they never get them to Canaan. That's Joshua. Right? The first 5 books. And the funny thing is, when you read the Torah portion, you never get into Canaan. You get right on the cusp of it. Then you start again. The Torah portion never includes Joshua. And you never actually physically get it. It's this timeless story that they're a part of. But of course, it does have an end, and the end is called Biyom Hahu. In those days, there's something coming. The end. There is a final collection of time when all that is wrong is made right, everything that is crooked is straightened, and justice is given to the world. And that includes us, right? Discipline is also on us, and it hurts. It's not always a nice thing. All right, guys, let's unmute ourselves and discuss these, if anybody wants to discuss these portions.